Joe, I'm here with Ben DuBose after the Rockets 140 to 127 win against the Utah Jazz in Houston. Rockets go move to 2-0 in the preseason. More importantly, we saw Kevin Durant's Houston Rockets debut. Ben, I know this is something we've been waiting for a while. It was against a Utah Jazz team that is by many predicting that might be the worst in the league and was missing several players. At the same time, Utah played quite well, so it made for an interesting challenge. But let's talk a little bit about Kevin Durant's debut and what you saw so far.
Yeah, I mean, Utah shot 20 of 45 from three, nearly 45% at volume, and you still won by 13 points. So I know there were some concerns defensively, and we'll get into that, especially the communication, but it's a very good day at the office on offense when you're able to put up 140 points against anybody and overcome that level of shooting from the other team. And yeah, above all else, this was just a celebratory environment at Toyota Center. As you can tell, I'm decked out because I went to this one as a fan, not as media. I've got a ticket package this year. I'll sell some of them, but the preseason, obviously, you're not going to be able to sell them for big value. So I kept tonight's ticket. Took my mom, who, as you know, Dave, is retired this year. So I was going to,
Yes.
I'm going to take her to a few games this year. And somehow it ended up being the debut of Kevin Durant. It was fitting because my mom helped me get into the Rockets when I was a kid during the Hakeem days, and now it's probably the
Oh, wow,
the
cool.
second greatest player in franchise history, at least in terms of the NBA pyramid. Now you can make arguments, for Moses Malone and other guys throughout NBA history. But I think pretty clearly, if you're going to rank NBA players that have played for the Rockets, it would be Hakeem and KD at 1-2 all time. And so, yeah, I enjoyed being able to see it with my mom because, yeah, it was a fun night at Toyota Center. And after he missed his first three shots, Dave, he made his last seven. And so in 23 minutes, he shot 7 of 10 from the field, so 70% shooting, 50% on threes, 100% on free throws. It felt like he got off to a slightly slow start, a little bit of nerves. He hasn't played with these guys before, and he finished with 20 points in 23 minutes on insane efficiency. That's just how damn good he is, even at 37 years old. And I guess for me, that's the biggest takeaway. I mean, you can't do a victory lap on one preseason game against the Utah Jazz, but if there are any concerns about this being the year that KD finally shows some signs of aging, I don't see that after tonight. Not saying it can't happen, but so far, so good. And I know some Rockets fans are looking for it. There was the report from Shams at ESPN today that the Rockets and Kevin Durant are both optimistic that a contract extension is going to get done before the season. That will probably take him through his age 39 year. So I'm sure some fans are sort of watching with a raised eyebrow. Well, Dave, I didn't see any signs of aging tonight. This looked like vintage Kevin Durant, and really it fixed a lot of things for the Rockets offense as a whole. We talked on Monday's postgame show about, Amen and Reed, especially in the half court, looking a little unsteady. Tonight, I thought everything ran more crisply. Obviously, the 140 points speaks for itself. And I just think, Kevin's efficiency is elite and the gravity that he still commands that made life easier for his teammates. As far as Kevin specifically, I think it was a pretty clearly an A-plus debut.
Yeah, I would agree actually with that. It's interesting. I think the main thing that you worry about a little bit with his age is just injuries. If
Mhm.
he's healthy, I mean, I think we saw it last year. I remember watching the game when he was here in Houston. He had quite a few turnovers, but it was just unbelievable offensively. You can't help but be impacted in a great way by what he does. He is so efficient, as you pointed out. There were a couple plays. I think Sengun threw it one time to the top of the key. He just immediate quick fire three drained it. It's something that's been missing on this team. No disrespect to Jalen Green, just not anywhere near as consistent, or excuse me, as efficient as Kevin Durant. And so the impact is, it's felt right away. We're gonna talk more about overall, how the big picture is, but offensively, what the Rockets did tonight. We'll talk about Sengun, we'll talk about Jabari, we'll talk about Amen. But those four, along with KD, were just incredibly efficient. KD as well, or excuse me, Reed Shepard as well. But I would really include the main four. Uh, the big three, if you want to call it, along with Jabari, really were effective offensively tonight. But from what I saw from KD in this game, um, just I would give it an A+. I thought he did really, really well.
Yeah, and I thought the chemistry with his teammates was really impressive for only having had a couple of weeks of practice with these guys. You see the movement off the ball. I thought he did a good job, Kevin, of making the defense respect all three levels. And when they closed out on him, he had a couple of nice passes to his teammates. It just felt like not only was Kevin drawing a lot of attention as you would expect, but he already had a plan for how to attack and how to best put his teammates in the right spots to succeed. And he didn't have a lot of assists because what ended up happening on several occasions, I can think of one to Sengun, another to Jabari, Kevin drew the attention. And what ended up happening, it was basically a hockey assist where it led to a foul. And so it should be considered free throws. Well, I guess it's not a hockey assist because that would be the assist before the assist. But the point is, it led to made free throws for the Rockets. And so even though it didn't go as an assist in the box score, he was making plays for his teammates. And so I think he just helps this offense on so many levels. It was night and day compared to last year, where the big weakness for Jalen Green, it felt like, especially in big games in the playoffs, defenses did not have to respect him in those middle areas. He was either going to rise and fire from three, or he was going to attack the rim. And too often when he attacked the rim, he didn't have the physicality or the size to finish. Well, not only does Kevin have more size when he goes to the basket, but more importantly, defenses have to account for him pulling up from anywhere, from 10 feet, from 15 feet, from 20 feet. That's the beauty of Kevin Durant. And it really changed this offense. And it felt like it unlocked a lot more for his teammates as well. And that's what really impressed me. This is a guy, I sort of object to the characterization. I was reading I think it was Kevin Pelton at ESPN had the article today projecting wins totals based on their analytics model. And he pointed out that Kevin, since getting to Phoenix, hasn't impacted winning to the same extent, according to the models, that he had earlier in his career. I'm actually not sure that's true, because I think the Phoenix situation was sort of set up for him to fail, and that they mortgaged so much to get him to the Suns that really the only teammate he had that wasn't a specialist was Devin Booker. Pretty much everyone else on those Phoenix Suns teams was very one-dimensional. They had one skill. There weren't a lot of well-balanced players. There weren't a lot of young players with upside, as opposed to here in Houston. Obviously Alperen Sengun is already an all-star, but Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith, Reed Shepherd, Tari Eason, there's a lot of diverse skill sets on this team, young players that can get better. And I think, again, one preseason game against the Utah Jazz, let's not get carried away. But I think there are things that Kevin can do for his teammates in Houston that he couldn't in Phoenix, simply because the roster composition wasn't there.
Yeah, it was an interesting game right out of the gate. As you pointed out, KD missed his first three shots. I actually didn't make that connection. I knew he was 1 for 4, but as you pointed out, first three, then made his next 7. The Rockets fell behind 11-3, and they had some early turnovers. And so I have to admit, I was, in the playback room, we were talking about it, and I'm thinking, this has been a concern in the back of my mind without Fred quite a bit. Like thinking Reed is just inexperienced. It's not a knock on anybody. Sengun, relatively speaking, as the full-time Shen hub, is a little bit inexperienced. And, of course, Amen is, quite inexperienced as the point guard at this point. Sengun had an early turnover, and the other guys had a 1 or 2 as well. And I thought, well, here we go. And then from that point on, they really, kind of excelled. I think they had 5 quick turnovers in the first quarter, only a couple, I believe, in the second quarter. And Sengun really led the charge there. If this game is any indication, as you point out, it is a very weakened Jazz team, as well as they played tonight. I mean, there were some guys on the Utah squad that I honestly were impressed with. Hendricks, Ace Bailey is a rookie, quite impressive sense of ball as well. But if tonight is any indication, Sengun's your point guard. Like, that's just what's going to happen, because the other guys are just, Reed Shepherd and Amen Thompson are going to have the ball in their hands. They're going to create as points at times. But, Sengun is obviously the most reliable. 13 assists tonight. And I believe 1 turnover, unless he picked up another one later. I believe he only had the 1 turnover.
Yeah, Amen had 1, Reed had 2. And the 2 from Reed were just miscommunication things. Yeah, they were much better at taking care of the ball, at least in the backcourt tonight.
Yeah, and he just looked he had, I think, 6 assists in the first game. Probably was well on his way to double-digit assists in that game. He only played the first half. He just looks comfortable. Obviously, KD being more efficient, Jabari being improved this year, those things are going to help. But he made some really good reads tonight. Also, I thought we saw a lot of Sengun like Sabonis tonight. A lot of it, like the dribble handoffs. There was a play, I know, I know I've got that clip in here somewhere, but basically he just handed it off to KD coming around the screen. He took out KD's defender, and KD bolted while Nurkic couldn't adjust. And we saw that at least 3, maybe 4 times tonight, where that dribble handoff was quite effective. So, I was impressed, with what Sengun did tonight. Is the point.
And the Rockets are just so big that when you get athletes that are that long going downhill, it's really, really tough to stop. When you're able to flank Sengun with Kevin Durant, with Amen Thompson, with Jabari Smith Jr., and with Tari Eason at times, it's very difficult for especially a bad NBA defense, which the Utah Jazz without Walker Kessler probably are, well, even with him. But it's not going to be easy to defend this offense. That's what stood out to me about this game tonight. And, Amen is lethal in transition. Like, he's already in like the 99th percentile, I would say, of NBA players in transition efficiency. But what was really different between game 1 and game 2, and, you have to adjust for competition a little bit. But I think in the half court at this stage of his career, you can contend for a championship with Amen as, I think, your third best half court offensive creator. I don't think Amen is yet to the point where he can be your best or second best in the half court. And that's not a shot at him. Again, he's still working on his jump shot, and he's just 22 years old. But I thought the floor opened up so much more for him because you had both Sengun and Kevin in the half court tonight. I thought that was night and day different to Monday. And so it helped Amen have a little bit more of a simplified role. And then by extension, it pushed Reed a little bit further down in the pecking order, and that got him some better opportunities as well. And so I think, in transition, Amen is elite. Defensively, he's elite.
Yeah,
in terms of half-court execution on offense, he's good. I don't think he's yet to the level to where he can be the best or second best player in half-court on a championship team. That needs to be the way this team is built, Kevin and Alperen Sengun. And again, you got to adjust for the sample size, all the caveats, one bad opponent in preseason, but so far so good. And I think if you had any concerns about Amen and Reed in the half court on Monday, I think those should be alleviated based on what you saw tonight.
Yeah, Amen 19 points tonight, 9 of 15 shooting. In the first half, he was 9 of 13.
He had a really nice corner three, by the way, just dead on.
Yes, absolutely. I know I've got that clip in here as well. He was really good. Obviously, you put Amen Thompson out in the open court, and the Rockets outscored him 16-2 in transition tonight, or not overall in the first half, I believe, or by mid-third quarter. And, Rockets just dominated in that stretch. There were plenty of plays where Amen looked, terrific defensively, getting out quickly out in transition. To me, Amen is, he had a first game where I think we were criticizing a little bit, not us particular, but some fans were a little bit disappointed with his performance. I thought tonight put some of that to rest. As you point out, it is the Jazz. You have to keep that in mind. But, this was the 3-point shot, I believe he hit that. I'll play this here real quick, that he hit off of a nice pass from Reed, actually. He's looked comfortable so far. It's 2 preseason games, but he's not having a problem with the catch and release corner 3.
And last year, I think he was mid to upper 30s from 3 in the corners. Like, if you isolate it specifically to the corners, he was actually pretty decent at that last year. So to see it look that crisp again, I'm not saying he's prime PJ Tucker just yet, but these are promising signs. And I agree with you on Reed. That was a nice read. I think, again, having both Kevin and Alperen out there is sort of like training wheels for Amen and Reed when it comes to, especially in the half court, being the floor general. And, I don't agree with really calling either of them the point guard because, as you said earlier, Dave, I'm in full agreement with you. Like, Sengun is the lead playmaker now. He's who they are running their offense through primarily. So you might have Amen or Reed dribbling the ball up the floor, but I don't think either of them is a point guard in the traditional sense. But I thought they both looked a lot more comfortable in the roles they were in tonight. Some of that is due to the competition, but I also think a lot of it's just due to, the Rockets having a much better overall team with Kevin Durant and that allowing them to sort of focus on the skills that they're already good at, as opposed to having to overextend the way they did at times in the first half. And, really the biggest difference between tonight and Atlanta, the one stretch, and we talked about this on Monday's post game, the one stretch where they had really sustained offensive success against the Hawks, other than the J.D. Davison minutes. And by the way, they were limited tonight, but J.D. Davison, as president of the J.D. Davison fan club, they were plus 17 in his minutes tonight. I think fourth most minutes off the bench, so another strong night for him. J.D. Davison fan club is still accepting memberships, so get in while you still can. But other than the J.D. factor and the double big on Monday night, it was very sticky. Tonight they almost ran no double big. Steven didn't play as expected. Second game in 3 nights. They're still building him back up. He's in his 30s, yada, yada. And then the double big lineup in the first half, they did it very briefly, but those were actually some of their worst minutes, at least in terms of plus minus. Clint had a big night from a rebounding perspective. Offensively in the half court, when they tried to play Capella and Sengun together, it was a little bit of a slog, in part because Clint wasn't really finishing at the rim. He seemed to have butterfingers at times. Probably just an off night. I wouldn't read too much into it. One exhibition. But the larger point, I think the Rockets had success tonight without the double big. And that's really important because so much last year, we talked about it Monday, the formula was using the double big, all the offensive rebounding, all the screen setting to get these second chance opportunities because they just didn't have enough creation. They didn't have enough wiggle. They didn't have enough that they could turn to. Tonight, they were able to generate elite offense without Steven Adams and basically without going to the double big at all. And so I think that's noteworthy as well, that they were able to execute much more traditionally. Reed Shepherd got his second straight start in the starting lineup, which I think tells you what Ime Udoka is thinking as far as, longer term, what he wants to do, the sustainability. Not saying it's a given that Reed's going to start, but I think in a perfect world, they want him to be ready for that type of role. And I just think that not just the numbers and the efficiency, but the way they got those numbers without having to go for the double big stimulus was noteworthy. I mean, they still want the double big as an option. It can be really good in certain matchups. But last year, I don't know if they're getting 140 points against anybody on good efficiency without the double big.
Yeah, you're right. And that's actually leading me kind of into what I want to talk about here. And this is not criticism, and maybe it's a mild concern, but I do, right now they have added what they didn't have last year, and that's KD, and they have an assassin they can hand the ball to it down the stretch.
They also have J.D. Davison. Come on, Dave.
Yeah.
G League MVP.
I mean, clearly the second best player on the team. There's no question. But, they have that. But really, the 5 starters they have right now, and I don't know if Reed's going to stay in there or not, but they're all kind of offensive weapons. Jabari's an improving offensive weapon, certainly. But all of those guys, they're not really any offensive liabilities. I do want to talk a little bit about whether this team's kind of identity is going to change. Right now, they don't have Durant Finney-Smith. And I have been concerned, I guess is the right word, a little bit about just losing Fred, losing Dylan, and to a lesser extent, losing Jalen. You've lost 3 starters that were at least kind of, together for a couple of years, and that was a big part of your identity defensively. Dorian Finney-Smith's going to be a key player. The Rockets are clearly improved offensively. I think we've seen that in the first 2 games, even if it is just preseason. Have they taken a step back defensively a little bit? And I say this because the Hawks torched them from 3-point range in the first half. That was the Rockets starters or key guys. And the Jazz tonight, some of those were contested, but they were on fire from 3-point range. Hendricks draining them, Sensabaugh draining them, Ace Bailey hitting tons of shots. Again, it maybe the identity is going to change, and the Rockets are going to win more games with offense than their defense. Maybe they step back to just 10th, 11th in defense. Again, I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I'm just wondering if you see some of that until Dorian Finney-Smith gets back.
Especially early in the year without Dorian Finney-Smith and integrating these new pieces. We saw at least 2 classic Ime Udoka rage timeouts, even in the preseason. Those still exist, where there's a breakdown in communication and he immediately, just in disgust, brings them to the bench to yell at them. Even in the preseason, Ime's still going to Ime, and I think it speaks to the larger trend. Look, if the Jazz don't shoot the lights out, 20 of 45, 44.5% from 3, that's really good. With a little bit better luck, the Rockets win this game by 20 plus, but the 45 3-point attempts, that's too many. You talk to anybody in the NBA and they'll tell you, look, 3-point shooting accuracy, that's generally luck-based for the most part, but 3-point shooting volume is not. That's what good defenses can control. And so giving up 45 3-point shots, and so many of them were just, lapses in communication. Two guys looked at each other and, one thought that the other was going to pick up the assignment, and then it just didn't happen. And I think it's just the perfect storm. It's not that they can't do it. And I do think it's something that, the glass half full view, as they get more experience playing with each other and you get Dorian Finney-Smith back, I think they should improve as the year progresses. But right now, you lost two communicators in Fred and Dylan. You're supposed to get one really elite defensive coordinator and communicator, excuse me, in DFS. He's not ready. And then you have all these new pieces playing with guys they haven't played before, most notably Kevin Durant. And yeah, it's a little spotty at times, and some of the live ball turnovers play into it as well. It wasn't quite as bad as the other night, but when you have these live ball turnovers, that's where you end up getting these clean 3-point looks in transition. And so, yeah, the 3-point accuracy from the Jazz was sort of fluky in that, they shouldn't shoot that well against air. But the volume, getting up 45 threes, I'm sure that's something that's going to drive Ime Udoka and his staff up the wall, and it's going to be a talking point, and they can get a little bit better. But I do think it's a little concerning in that, when you run a lot of double big, and someone in the comments is saying they're trying to zone in the preseason that they won't in the regular season. Yeah, I've seen some of that. But I do think also that tonight was a little worrisome in that typically they give up volume when they run a lot of double big, and especially that zone. To give up the volume they did tonight without doing much double big, again, it is the preseason, it's an outlier, but it's something that I do think you should have a little bit of a raised eyebrow for, especially when we know they lost a couple of really valued communicators from last year's team, and you don't yet have DFS, who is supposed to excel at that specific thing. So the glass half full view that I would offer is that, as the year progresses, as they get more used to playing with one another, that should resolve itself pretty organically, I would think. But at least to start the year, I think it's a fair concern.
Yeah.
And also Reed just being in year two. Look, let's be honest, Reed individually, he wasn't as foul prone as he was in his debut on Monday. That's a step in the right direction. But
True.
If you're starting a guy at 21 years old, year two, he's probably not going to be an elite NBA communicator. So that's another drawback if you go that route. So, it's one of those things. I don't think it's the end of the world, especially if you're able to be as elite offensively as they were tonight. And there are reasons to think they'll get better as the year moves along. But at least to start the year, yeah, they might not be the top 5 defense that we're used to simply based on the changes and not having Dorian just yet.
Yeah, because so much of it is just cohesion, chemistry. I'm not saying these guys aren't capable of building that again. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is right out of the gate that good. But I feel like it's just going to take a little bit of time with so many kind of new pieces, even if some of them were here last year coming off the bench. Last year they won with defense. They won with very low turnovers, great 3-point defense. And they won by just killing you in the possessions battle, by offensive rebounding. Tonight, Rockets won the rebounding battle in the first half. I'm really studying the first half. It's primarily when the starters played. They did go into the mid third quarter, but looking at the first half, Rockets won the rebounding battle 22-16 in that half. Outshot them 51 field goal attempts to 38, 11-7 in turnovers. So that right there was a recipe for success, even if it was close. The reason the Jazz were close to the Rockets at halftime is because they just shot so darn effectively.
I would also pay attention to the first half of the third quarter. Someone noted in the comment section that the Rockets switched to more man in the second half, which I would agree with, and that's when the turnover started to pick up. So, yeah, maybe some of it's tactical. They went a little zone heavy in the first half, and the Jazz exploited that. I also think the Rockets had more. I don't have the splits between first and second half, but by the eyeball test, they had a lot more of their turnovers in the first half. I think that contributed as well. But yeah, I think you might can pay attention to the third quarter as well. And so there was, again, if you squint hard enough, a little bit of progress, but yeah, it's not something that you should overlook entirely either.
Good. Yeah, let's hope that's the case. I wanted to bring up a comment here. I know Snail Champion made just right here. We can close on this topic, but he just says Jabari looks like a completely different player. He was 7 of 11 tonight for 18 points. Had a great start to the first game. Matter of fact, both of these games, first game and second game preseason, opened with the Jabari 3, very first possession. Tonight was just a little bit better. Obviously, had some nice, from Sengun passes, dunks, and things of that nature. But Jabari was good tonight. And what are you seeing first 2 games? Is all the hype about his offseason real to you?
Yeah, there was a possession in the first half, at least one, where he cut off ball to the bucket and finished. I thought those were really encouraging. I also thought there was one possession where he ended up sticking a three where he wanted to give the ball to Sengun to sort of create out of the high post, and his defender sagged towards Sengun to make that a little more difficult. So he just dribbled into a three, and it looked much more fluid than it has in his first three NBA seasons. In terms of there was very limited, there wasn't much in the way of wasted movement from getting his handle to his shot. And so I thought he looks, again, a lot of this I think is the simplified role, in that now that you have at least two top shelf playmakers, and you hope a man can grow into that. But right now, I think KD and Shingun are the clear top two in the half court, and the Rockets aren't searching for, maybe you had one the last 2 years with Shingun, and I don't want to sell him short, but I think Shingun is better now than even the last 2 years, probably because of Eurobasket.
Looks like it,
I think
yeah.
he's in incredible form right now. This is probably, at least for my recollection, the best I've ever seen him play.
I agree.
I think, Jabari has clearly done a lot of work in the offseason on his handle, on his body. He doesn't get bumped off his spots. In the preseason, I'm less focused on the stat lines because you don't have the minutes, the shot attempts for things to normalize. So I might be really good or really bad. It can be wonky in a given game. I'm more looking at the process. And so Jabari's not getting bumped off his spots the way he was very frequently in previous seasons. He looks more comfortable in his body. There isn't as much wasted movement. If he needs to rise and fire relatively quickly, like that three he had when the defender sort of went towards Shingun a little bit, he's more comfortable doing that. He just looks like, again, someone who's much more calm and within himself. And I think a lot of this, some of it is skill development, but some of it also is simplicity of role. The last couple of years, the Rockets have sort of been searching for who the stars are going to be. Obviously in the rebuilding years, but even the last 2 years, they haven't had that clear alpha. So it's sort of been, all the younger guys, certainly Jalen, but also Jabari as well. At times, Tari, and you can go up and down the lineup with the young guys, the core six, the core seven at times. And they've all been sort of searching and taking turns. Now I think it's much more clear where Jabari fits in the big picture. I think there's a much more clear hierarchy. And I think one of the big benefits is that the more ancillary pieces like Jabari, like Reed, can sort of be a star in their role as opposed to having to, search for what that role is.
Yeah, we'll do this before we close. Last question. Luke sent this in. We talked about this a little bit on the last show, but if we happen to make it to the finals this year, is there a chance Fred will be back by the month of June? I mean, I'll let you chime in on that, but I just personally don't see it. I mean, looking at I'm a big fantasy football guy, and just looking at so many players coming back from ACL injuries. I know football's different than basketball, but it just takes time. And I can't imagine the Rockets rehabbing this really furiously and then thrusting him into a mid-playoff situation. I could be wrong, but yeah.
The study that I've seen, the average ACL recovery timetable in the NBA is 9.8 months, which would take until around the start of July next year, which is after the NBA finals. Now, if you squint hard enough, you can argue that, technology is improving by the year, and some of those 9.8 months include the off season, so they maybe take a little bit longer because you can. So maybe if you squint hard enough and, he rehabs hard, you can get it closer to 8 to 9 and, make it back at some point in the playoffs. I don't think it's impossible. I'm told pretty strongly that both the Rockets and Fred are shooting for that scenario. I mean, ideally before the playoffs, but, they're not foreclosing the possibility. One thing that makes me at least open-minded to the possibility is that because Fred has a player option for the ensuing season, there's not a ton of risk to him, and that even if he doesn't play that well, even doesn't go that great for whatever reason, he can just pick up that player option. So it's not like he'd be potentially, risking tons of money if things don't go well. So he does have some security. However, when you look at the history of guys coming off of ACL injuries, I would be stunned if he came back to anything close to a starter's level role.
Yeah.
Like, it might be possible that he could build up to 15 to 20 minutes, and that's better than nothing. Like, he's a, if you could have him as a quality backup point guard, and obviously he's a good shooter, he makes good decisions. We talked about the defensive communication. Would that be a value? Absolutely. But I think it would be a real stretch to expect the Fred of last year's playoffs to be back by May or June. I think if everything goes right, and I still think it's less than 50-50, but if everything goes right, you could see Fred return by the playoffs, but I don't think it would be like a huge needle mover. It would be like maybe getting, an eighth or ninth man for your bench, which could be useful. Don't get me wrong. We saw, the 2018 Rockets sort of broke down because of the injuries in the playoffs. And, by game 7, they were playing the corpses of Joe Johnson and Ryan Anderson. So maybe,
Yeah.
Having Fred off the bench by the time you get deep in the playoffs could be really valuable. I wouldn't write off that scenario. I would just say, A, it's less than 50-50, and B, tap the brakes on anything expecting more than, say, 15 minutes per game off the bench if he does come back. Do not expect 30 to 35 minutes starting point guard level Fred VanVleet if he returns this season. Tap the brakes on that.
Yeah, and the other scenario, which we touched on briefly too, is just the possibility that that contract gets traded. As sad as it is, as much as the Rockets want to win with Fred, and I'm sure they do, KD is here now, and they need to win. I mean, you could see something like a Jrue Holiday or a player out there that the Rockets decide, look, we got to go for it. And we'll see how
and
that
that's going to
goes.
be conditional on how they play during the season. So it's pointless to go too
Absolutely.
far down that road now. But yeah, if things get off to a slow start, then yeah, you have that option. It's been reported this week, and I've confirmed it at Clutch Fans that the Rockets will be filing for a disabled player exception for Fred's contract, which will give them basically a $12.5 million TPE that can be used on players on one-year deals, basically half the value of Fred's contract. Now, they can't use it at the moment because of the hard cap at the first apron, but if they make trades during the year that lower the team payroll, potentially they could. Basically, there's no downside. Getting the disabled player exception does not rule Fred out. It just says that an independent physician appointed by the NBA deems it more likely than not that he's not going to be available by June 15th. June 15th is a designated day because that's around the end of the NBA Finals. And that circles back to Luke's question, which is, is Fred going to be back by the middle of June? I suspect the Rockets will get the disabled player exception because all NBA injury history tells us that it's less likely than likely. And maybe the Rockets get lucky and he defies the odds. But again, unlikely. And if they do, it's going to be for a smaller role, in my opinion, nothing major.
Appreciate it, Ben. It's always fun talking Rockets with you. Guys, we will do this again after next game. I don't believe they play until Tuesday against the Pelicans. We'll get to see Zion, the slim down 60% of what we usually see from Zion. And he looks good. So that'll be kind of a fun game to watch. And guys, I'm new to YouTube, but I believe if you subscribe, you'll be notified when we go live after the games. I believe that's how it works, the drill. So feel free to subscribe to the Clutch Fans channel, and you'll know when we go live. So Ben, appreciate you doing this. Rockets 2-0 in the preseason, looking good. Obviously, the competition will pick up here soon after these first couple of preseason games. But Rockets looking towards a very exciting season. I think all of us are really pumped up about it.
2 down, 100 to go, because you have 2 in the preseason, 82 in the regular season,
16.
and then 16 in the playoffs. So yeah, 100 more, Dave. We got this.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great one.